I want to kick things off today with a claim that honestly might ruffle some feathers.
Okay, let's hear it.
There's a school of thought among, serious secular historians, people without a theological dog in the fight, who argue that the true founder of Christianity as a global religion isn't actually Jesus.
Right. It's Paul.
It's Paul.
It is a provocative take, and to be clear, they aren't saying Jesus isn't the source of the message. The argument is more structural. It's that without Paul, the movement might have just stayed a small, local Jewish sect that, eventually faded out.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We're going to strip away the familiar Sunday school stories and look at the historical mechanics of how this tiny group just exploded around 50 A.D.
Yeah, we're basing this on a really in-depth lecture on the humanities of the Bible, specifically looking at Acts and Paul's own letters.
We're going to unpack his surprisingly elite background, the psychological crisis that drove him, and this is my favorite part, the unsung heroes who basically saved his career.
And his life, multiple times.
And his life. And we'll finish with a letter that our source calls the Declaration of Independence for the Faith.
It's a fantastic place to start.
So let's start with the man himself, because I think most people have this caricature of Paul, or Saul, as just a grumpy religious zealot.
Oh, he was definitely intense, no question. But zealot is just, it's too small a word. The source we're looking at describes him as a prepared person, almost a perfect storm of a human being, a genius, really.
Okay, genius is a word we throw around a lot. Are we talking just a smart guy or something more?
Something more. We're talking about a kind of intellectual firepower that was almost unique for that time. Think of it like this. Paul had a double major that shouldn't have been possible.
A double major in what?
Well, first, look at where he's from. He's not from Israel. He's a diaspora Jew born in Tarsus.
Diaspora, meaning he grew up outside the Jewish homeland.
Exactly. And Tarsus wasn't some backwater village. It was a metropolis, a major hub of Greek or Hellenistic culture.
So that gives him a completely different worldview from the start.
A huge difference. He grew up as a minority in a massive pagan city. He wasn't sheltered. He had the best Greek education, rhetoric, philosophy. He could quote their poets.
So that's major number one. Greek culture. What's number two?
Jewish law.
And
The best of the best. His family sent him to Jerusalem to study under Gamaliel.
And Gamaliel was?
Gamaliel was the most respected rabbi of the era, the Harvard law professor of his day.
So he's not just bilingual in language, he's fluent in two completely different cultures.
That is the key insight. None of the original disciples could do this. I mean, Peter was a fisherman. He couldn't walk into a lecture in Athens and debate Stoics. Paul was the bridge. He could take a Jewish concept like Messiah and translate it using Greek philosophical terms. He wasn't just spreading a message, he was translating its entire operating system.
That makes so much sense. But there's another piece to his resume, right? His status.
Right. He wasn't a peasant. His family was influential, maybe even on the city council. And he had the ultimate golden ticket, Roman citizenship, born with it.
Which was incredibly rare for a Jew at the time.
Very rare. It's like having a diplomatic passport today. It gave him legal protections that saved his neck more than once.
So we've got a wealthy, connected, highly educated man with a passport that gets him anywhere. He's winning. But then there's the dark side. The source calls him the Grim Reaper of the early church.
It's a heavy title, but it fits. He was actively hunting Christians, presiding over executions.
Which brings us to the big question. Why? Why does a man with everything going for him suddenly switch sides so dramatically?
To understand that, you have to get inside his head. It all comes down to what the source calls merit theology.
Okay, let's unpack that. Merit theology.
It's the logic of a devout Pharisee at the time. The idea is transactional. If you follow the rules, Sabbath, dietary laws, purification, God sees you as righteous, you check the boxes, you get the reward.
It's a checklist for salvation.
It is, but our source uses a very modern and I think very powerful term to describe what this system was doing to a guy like Paul. It calls it gaslighting.
Gaslighting. Wow. How does that apply to a first-century Pharisee?
Well, think about it. The system tells him, if you do all these things, you are holy, you are righteous. And Paul is a perfectionist. He is doing all of it flawlessly. He's the valedictorian of this system.
So on paper, he's perfect.
Exactly. But then he looks inside his own heart, and he still sees jealousy. He sees arrogance. He sees anger. The external box checking isn't fixing the internal corruption.
He feels like an imposter.
A total imposter. He's in this state of severe cognitive dissonance. The system says, you're righteous, but he feels anything but.
That is so relatable. I mean, doing all the right things in your career or your life, but feeling totally empty inside.
And for Paul, that conflict came out as rage. The source argues his violence against Christians was a projection of that internal crisis. He was trying to silence the part of himself that knew the system was failing.
So he's a powder keg. And that keg explodes on the road to Damascus.
It does. And this is where we get the classic story. Bright light, voice from heaven, falls off a horse, boom, he's a Christian.
But it wasn't that simple.
Well, the event happened, but the source argues the conversion, the actual intellectual rewiring, didn't happen just from a light show.
A light show doesn't rewrite a belief system, especially for a logician trained by Gamaliel.
Precisely. The light blinded him, it stopped him, but it didn't give him the answers. And this is where we meet a character who almost never gets enough credit, Ananias.
Right, Ananias. He's just the guy who prays for Paul and his eyes open. He's like a cameo appearance.
We treat him that way, but the source suggests Ananias was an intellectual heavyweight himself. Paul is a genius in crisis. He's not going to be convinced by a simple prayer. He needs answers.
So what did Ananias do?
Paul stays with Ananias for days, fasting, which tells you he's in deep concentration. Ananias provides the download. He doesn't just heal Paul's eyes. He explains the theology. He explains how Jesus solves Paul's merit crisis.
Ananias is the one who actually converts him intellectually.
He provides the key that unlocks Paul's mind. Without that intellectual explanation, Paul might have just gone back to being confused and angry.
Okay, that completely changes how I see that story.
Mm-hmm.
So Paul gets it. He's ready to go. He heads back to Jerusalem, and I'm guessing they don't exactly roll out the red carpet.
Far from it. Nobody trusts him. I mean, why would they? This is the guy who was dragging their friends to prison just a few weeks ago. They think it's a trap.
He's radioactive.
Totally. And this is where the second unsung hero steps in, a man named Barnabas.
Barnabas. I know the name, but usually just as Paul's travel buddy later on.
And that's a huge disservice. At this point, Barnabas is the senior figure. He's also a diaspora Jew from Cyprus, so he understands Paul's background. And he saw potential where everyone else saw a monster.
So he sponsors him.
He puts his own reputation on the line. Barnabas is the only one brave enough to meet with Paul, vet him, and then bring him to the apostles, Peter and James, and say, I vouch for this guy.
Without Barnabas, Paul never even gets in the door.
Never. But here's the really fascinating part. Even after that, it doesn't just work. Paul starts arguing with people. He's too intense. He's a hot potato.
Old habits die hard.
So Barnabas makes a brilliant strategic move. He basically tells Paul, you need to go home, go back to Tarsus, and wait.
He puts him in timeout.
Pretty much. And this isn't a short timeout. The source points to a huge gap in the timeline here. Paul spends about 10 years back in Tarsus.
10 years. That's a decade.
Yeah.
We usually picture him going straight from Damascus to his missionary journeys.
Nope. There's a silent decade. But this wasn't wasted time. This was the incubator. Paul had to rethink everything he knew. He spent 10 years rereading the Old Testament through this new lens. He was building the entire theological foundation for Christianity.
So he was doing the homework.
All of it. And he stays there in Tarsus until Barnabas, who's now leading this booming church in Antioch, realizes he needs help.
Antioch was the third largest city in the empire. A big deal.
Huge deal. And the church was exploding with non-Jewish converts. It was messy. Barnabas needed someone who understood both worlds, so he personally goes to Tarsus to find Paul and bring him back into the game.
So Barnabas saves him twice. First by vouching for him, then by recruiting him when the time was right.
He's the talent scout who found the superstar.
Okay, so Barnabas brings him to Antioch, and the mission to the non-Jews takes off, which leads to another crisis.
A huge one. As all these Gentiles, these non-Jews, start joining the movement, the conservative leaders back in Jerusalem panic.
Why panic? More people sounds like a good thing.
Not if you think they all have to become Jewish first. They send people to Antioch to say, great, you believe in Jesus, but now you have to get circumcised, stop eating pork, follow the law.
The merit system is creeping back in. Jesus plus the rules.
Exactly. They were trying to bolt the checklist back on, and this is where Paul goes nuclear. He realizes that if they give in, the movement just dies. So he writes the letter to the Galatians.
Which our source calls the Declaration of Independence.
It's a powerful title for a letter.
But it fits. Galatians is where the faith officially breaks away from the requirements of Jewish law. It's where Paul draws a line in the sand and says, we are saved by faith alone. It's the breakup letter with the whole box-checking system.
It is a street fight in the form of a letter. He is furious. He calls out Peter to his face. And the source makes a crucial point. You cannot understand the book of Romans, his theological masterpiece, without understanding Galatians first.
Why is that?
Because Galatians is the raw, passionate argument for survival. Romans is the polished, systematic explanation that comes later.
So Galatians is the revolution.
And Romans is the Constitution. He's fighting for the soul of the movement, making it accessible to everyone, Greek, Roman, Syrian, anyone.
And that really brings us back to that claim at the start, that
Mhm.
he's the architect of the faith as a world religion.
When you zoom out, the evidence is everywhere. The source mentions a sign at the traditional site of Paul's conversion in Damascus. It just reads, "Here, world history changed."
Yeah, that gives you chills.
There's also a painting in a university in Athens. It shows all the great Greek philosophers. And at the end of the line is Paul with his hand raised, as if he's not just joining their conversation, but fundamentally changing it.
He took the baton of Western thought and ran in a new direction.
He did. Without him, the movement might have remained a Jewish sect that just faded away.
So as we wrap this up, let's just recap. We have the elite student, the psychological crisis, the intellectual mentor in Ananias, and the strategic sponsor in Barnabas.
It's a reminder that history isn't simple. We love the great man theory, that Paul just did it all himself. But he didn't. He was enabled by others.
And it's a story of patience, too. Those 10 silent years. That's the part that sticks with me.
It's crucial. We want instant results. Paul had this world-changing experience, but he still needed a decade of quiet study to be ready.
So it leaves us with a really provocative thought from the source. We look back and think history was inevitable. Of course, Christianity became a world religion.
But when you look at the details, it was incredibly fragile. Think about it. If Barnabas hadn't decided to take a huge social risk on a guy everyone hated,
Paul might have been killed or just ignored forever.
or if Ananias had just been some simple guy who prayed for him and sent him on his way without explaining the deep theology,
Paul might have misunderstood the entire mission. The history of the Western world could look completely different.
it's staggering to think about.
It really highlights the power of the so-called side characters. You might not be the Paul, but you could be the Barnabas who opens the door.
Or the Ananias who provides the crucial insight.
So maybe that's the final thought for you to chew on today. Who is the Barnabas or Ananias in your life right now? Who's that person unlocking your potential?
Or maybe, more importantly, whose potential are you unlocking? Are you willing to vouch for the hot potato? Because you really never know if that person is going to be the one to change history.
That's it for this deep dive. We hope you see the architect in a whole new light. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.